So the next lesson we're going to be covering is the different kinds of train types. We're going to be working on creating our own shift dress. But before we do that, I wanted to make sure you guys understood a couple of things. The different kinds of dresses that there are available, silhouettes, and the train types. And that when you hear someone talking about dress types and silhouettes, you want to familiarize yourself with what they look like and what the outcome of these should be. Some of the changes in each silhouette are very subtle, but they make a difference, especially if you intend to sew for someone else and they may come to you and say, okay, I want a particular silhouette of dress. They're looking for a particular style of dress, and you want to make sure that you are comfortable and familiar with each of the silhouettes. So the first one we're going to talk about is the ball gown. And it's very obvious what the ball gown is. It is this huge voluminous dress with a very narrow waist, and the variations for the bodice or the top of the dress can be very different as far as the way it looks. But the main basic silhouette and shape is the ball gown, which means it's shaped like a giant ball of whatever fabric you decide to use. And again, it's very narrow at the waist and it's very full and voluminous. It often requires a petticoat to achieve. And a petticoat is something that you would put underneath. In fashion history, we cover the underneath and the under designs of a dress to make sure that it has a particular look. So they would call it a crinoline cage. It's just basically a way to shape a dress so that it looks more exaggerated than it would normally look. So that is what's involved in a ball gown. The second silhouette for a dress is the A-line. And this dress shape, again, the bodice varies. However, the waist and below fairly means just that the dress comes to a point at about the upper hip. And then it just comes down to sort of like a triangle, what we call the shape of an A. So it's just basically at the waist or the hip, and then it just slowly comes down. The modified A-line comes a little bit lower, and it also has that A shape, or it comes down like a triangle. So you have the A-line, which is just a straight down A shape, and then the modified comes a little bit lower and it has that exact A shape. So those are 3 silhouettes so far. The fourth silhouette is the trumpet. Sometimes it gets confused with the mermaid, but those are 2 actual different types of silhouettes. A trumpet dress comes down to, I would say, just about the thigh, and then it goes out. And it's not as tight as a mermaid style dress. So if you're talking about a trumpet dress, it is very close fitting to about the lower thigh, and then it comes out and it's full. So that's a trumpet style dress. Now, a mermaid dress, which is actually a very, very popular dress style, and it gets the name obviously from the fact that it looks like a mermaid's tail. So the entire dress is very close fitted to the body, and it comes all the way down, usually past the calves, and it hits, and then it just completely fills out. And like I said, it looks like a mermaid's tail because the entirety of the dress is very close fitting to the body, and then it just sort of floats out. The sheath dress, or what we may also know as the shift dress, which is a straight dress. It has variations as far as what the bodice looks like, but it's just a very basic straight up and down dress, and it can go just below the knee, it can go to the ankles, it can hit the floor. A shift dress is pretty much a basic straight up and down dress. The Tlink dress, we also cover that in our 1950s fashion and film. We cover that pretty heavily as well. Is a dress that, again, is a dress that goes in at the waist, and then it floats out, and it only hits about the knee, and it's a very full dress, a very full skirt. And if you remember, it was popularized by the designer Christian Dior. So he was someone that familiarized us with that shape of a very cinched waist and then a full skirt, also known as a Tlink dress. So when you hear someone saying, I want a Tlink dress, you're usually referring to that sort of style. And lastly is the mini. And a lot of us who are not even fully initiated in the fashion industry, we know what a mini dress looks like. It's often at the knee or just above the knee. So we see tons of examples. It's the most modern rendition of the silhouettes that we've seen covered in this list. It's like I said, it's just above the knee, and it comes in different variations. It could be done casually, it could be done semi-formally and formally. So those are just some of the main basic dress silhouettes that you will come across in your dressmaking endeavors. There can be many variations on each of these designs, but again, these are the basic ones you'll often hear when you're talking about a dress silhouette. So now let's get to the dress trains. Again, whether you are going to be designing for yourself or you intend to possibly design for others, you want to become familiar with train types. You'll often hear this in more formal attire, and a train type is just the back end of a dress, and each, believe it or not, each length has its own determining name. So first we have the sweep, and it just basically, it's just a bit of a train, and it hits the floor and it comes out a little, it's very subtle, and that's why they call it a sweep, because it just sweeps the floor. The second one you have is the court, and that comes out a little bit further. And in your notes, I'll have it written down. It gives you the exact measurements for what constitutes, what length constitutes for what train. The third is the panel, and that usually involves the dress being cut on its own and then an additional panel being cut and added to the dress in the back. And you'll see examples of that as well, of what a panel looks like. You'll have the watteau, and that's usually what we also call a cape, and it sits just on the shoulders and it comes and it sweeps the floor. So again, this is not necessarily attached to the dress in the back at the waist where we kind of normally believe train starts. This is just another variation of a train, and it usually involves what we say is a cape look, and it hangs on the shoulder. The chapel is a much longer train, and these are when we start to get into the more bridal aspects, when we start to hear the words like the chapel. And this just means that the length of the train is a lot longer. The cathedral, now these are huge trains, and they are meant to take up an enormous amount of space. We're talking about feet now. When we're talking about trains, we're talking about just enormous train detail. And the last, the monarch, royalty. These are very, very large, room-taking up trains, and they're very dramatic and they're very elaborate trains. And just keep in mind when you're talking about these trains that they also are what makes the garments more expensive, because obviously more train requires more fabric. So these are things you want to keep in mind, like I said, whether you're designing for yourself or you're designing for someone else and making a career of it. When a client or someone asks for these sort of requests, you have to understand that that is going to increase the cost of the garment, because it's going to increase the amount of fabric you have to buy in order to achieve this look. Because it's not an essential part of the garment. It is something that you're adding on for drama and glamour. So that basically covers the silhouette types for the dresses and the train type. It helps you with the design process when you're trying to map out exactly what you want that dress to look like. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. Videos are uploaded weekly covering dressmaking, fashion, lectures, and more.